OK, just another issue that was in the newspapers this morning, and it's a report that says, Davina Rankin, that Margaret Thatcher, who's very well at the moment, I should point out, but plans are being made to give her a state funeral. It would be the first one since Winston Churchill for a former Prime Minister. Would that be a fitting tribute, briefly?
The fact that she's well and healthy, I would not anticipate. I think funeral arrangements are best left to when they're needed. I think it's down
you have to plan ahead, obviously, for something like this.
You do have to plan ahead for something like this, but she's well and she'll probably be around for a lot longer, so I think it's premature to be planning her funeral at this stage.
Oh, Margaret Curran, Gordon Brown's planning this. Is that a fitting tribute to the former Tory leader?
Well, if the Tories won't even advocate it, and it is a bit distasteful perhaps to talk about funeral plans for someone who's still alive. Mrs Thatcher was not well thought of in the East End of Glasgow, so our funeral arrangements are a matter for other people, not for me, I can assure you.
So you wouldn't back the idea of a state funeral?
No, I wouldn't. Well, again, it's a bit distasteful talking about it, and I accept Davina's point, but I remember Thatcher's legacy, and I couldn't get over that, I don't think.
Is it a fitting tribute, John Mason?
Well, I think both Thatcher and Blair were not well thought of in the East End of Glasgow, so I don't think either of them should have a state funeral in the East End of Glasgow.
Well, I don't imagine it'll be in the East End of Glasgow, that's for sure. And what about you, Ian Robertson?
Well, I think politics is a very difficult job, Gary, and I think that although she is deeply unpopular in the East End of Glasgow and won't get a lot of support in these parts, I think that she's contributed a great deal and served her country, and I think it's fitting that we recognise that and that she's given the state funeral. I don't have any problem with it, and I'm sure that many people will recognise what she did, you know, for government. Just
a final point then. You've all told us how in touch with the electorate you are. You've been out there meeting them. They're all telling you, of course, that food prices are going up. Nobody could fail to notice that. So let's just check how in touch you are with food prices. I've just got a quick question for each of you. Yeah, and I can see the dread on your faces. Let's start with you, Davina Rankin. What we did was we checked a couple of supermarkets. This is like an average price, so we'll let you be out slightly. 6 eggs. We checked free-range eggs. How much would you pay for half a dozen eggs?
It's about £1.40, £1.50, depending on your store.
£1.36, so that was fairly close. Margaret Curran, perhaps well-known ATT bags from a well-known company. How much would you pay for ATT bags?
Something like that.
£1.77.
Oh, hey, how do you like that?
Let's see who does the shopping in your houses. Let's go to you then, John Mason. What about a white loaf? And you can give us the price for the own brand or perhaps for one of the well-known brands, so either or.
Yeah, well, there's quite a range, and I mean, I'd probably pay around £1 because you do get a better quality if you pay a little bit more, but for a lot of people it's got to be cheaper than that.
Well, we're sold 69 pence for the own brand and £1.21 for the other one. And just finally to you then, Ian Robertson, 4 pints of milk, the one that most people buy in their weekly shop.
Oh, no, I never buy 4 pints of milk.
2.27
I can't afford 4 pint cartons. I would say 4 pints of milk, I would say that's going to be in the region of £2.20.
No, unfortunately, you take the booby prize on this one. £1.44 for 4 pints of milk. So
I never buy 4 pints.
Not quite as expensive as you thought.
Well,
look, let me thank you all very much indeed for joining us on the programme this afternoon. So we've heard from the 4 main parties, but they're not the only ones, of course, who want to give a voice to the people of Glasgow East. Our reporter, Katrina Renton, has been out and about to see what the smaller parties are up to.
If you live in Glasgow East, you might be confused by all the attention. This by-election is being watched by far more than the people who actually have a vote. Some believe the result here will determine the Prime Minister's future. But what's being reported about the place itself is pretty depressing. This is the constituency where, in some parts, life expectancy is just 63 for a man, 14 years less than the UK average. 50% of adults have no qualifications at all, and it has the second highest unemployment rate in Scotland. Some would argue the larger parties have had a chance to make inroads over the years, but seem to have failed.
I am your local Green candidate.
Retired GP Dr Eileen Duke is the Greens candidate. She's currently the party's co-convener for Glasgow and the west of Scotland.
We think everything's going in the wrong direction at the moment. The other parties are not dealing with climate change, and climate change is what is causing a lot of the problems around here. The fuel poverty, the poor public transport, the petrol prices are going up and everybody's concentrating on cars, whereas most people in this area use public transport, and they would like good affordable public transport instead of money being thrown away.
All eyes are on the big parties in this election, but there are 9 candidates standing, and the smaller parties say that their message is just as important to the people in Glasgow East.
Now, there are 2 socialist parties contesting this election. Opinion is split about whether there's room for them both. All agree the area needs a champion. Tricia McLeish is a technical officer at Glasgow City Council. She lives in the constituency and is a founding member of Solidarity.
Solidarity are for a minimum wage of £8.50 an hour. We are also for a minimum pension of £200 a week. We also stand for public ownership of the big corporations such as gas, electricity and the oil industry. People have struggled too long with rising fuel bills and food costs. We're saying we need a change, and that's why we're asking people to vote for Solidarity.
Much of this constituency is dogged with entrenched poverty and generations of worklessness. But this isn't news. The Scottish Socialist Party's Frances Curran is a former member of the Scottish Parliament. She grew up in this constituency and has campaigned in the area for over 30 years.
I want to put it on the agenda and challenge every other politician about deprivation and poverty. Tackling it is not that difficult. We've never been as rich as we are now, but who's got the wealth? We need to redistribute it. And we would introduce policies that would redistribute wealth. Introduce an £8 an hour minimum wage, and you've tackled it. Increase child benefit, and you've tackled it. Increase pensions, and you've tackled it. And the point is the wealth is there. Don't let anybody kid you on.
So would a vote for any of these smaller parties actually make any difference?
People should vote Green because we are the only ones that have the answer to the main problem in the world today, the main threat to the human species, which is global warming.
£6 billion was wasted in an illegal war in Iraq. £100 billion is going towards the replacement of Trident weapons. We say use that £106 billion more productively, put it into tackling poverty and inequality.
If people want to make a protest, then voting Scottish Socialist Party is the way to do it. Because it would send a signal both to Westminster and to the Scottish Parliament and the SNP that no more, we're not accepting it, we're going to rise up, we're going to elect a fighter.
If you live in Glasgow East, you can expect more of this for the next 11 days. And it's up to voters to decide who they think can give this place the boost it needs.
Katrina Renton there with the Greens, the Scottish Socialists and Solidarity. In total, there are 9 candidates standing in the Glasgow East by-election on Thursday, July the 24th. There they are in the order that they will appear on the ballot paper.